Otha Turner died in 2003. He was one of the last surviving musicians from a little-known and fast-vanishing musical tradition whose origins are in the slave trade and whose wider family influenced much of the music you'll hear when you turn on the radio today.
The Word.
It was the discovery of a lifetime for Alan Lomax, the great American folk music pioneer, who travelled up to the hill country in the far north of Mississippi State in the 1940s, looking for traditional forms of music to document and record. Here was a joyful music, made for parties and dancing, clearly a close cousin of the blues, but which seemed to combine the rhythm and energy of African drumming with the kind of instruments you would more commonly expect to find in 17th century German military music. Wrapped up in one small tradition, in the notes played and the instruments used, was so much overlapping and turbulent history.
So, where had this music come from?
Our story starts in 15th century Europe, where the fife and drum were first used in military bands, to provide music on the march. When George of Hanover ascended to the British throne in 1714, he brought this continental tradition with him, and the practice was later transferred to the colonies, where joining the army as a musician was one of the few military opportunities open to African Americans. This style of military fife and drum music can still be heard today in US and English military drum corps, with tunes like The Roast Beef of Old England. But what seems to have happened is that after the Civil War, the disbanded African American soldiers took their instruments home with them and started playing music of their own. And it seems indisputable that their African heritage influenced what they did. Listen, for example, to this talking drum music from Nigeria. Compare that to this performance by Napoleon Strickland, one of Otha Turner's pupils, at one of the famous summer farmers' picnics where he and his band would perform. As well as the similarity of tone to the talking drum music, the performance here takes on a bacchanalian quality, echoing the description Alan Lomax gives in his book The Land Where Blues Began. In voodoo ceremonies, dancers make pelvic gestures towards the drum to honour the holy music that is inspiring them. I never expected to see this African behaviour in the hills of Mississippi, just a few miles south of Memphis. Many of the blues stars from further down the Delta went on to reshape the musical world, influencing everyone from Elvis Presley,
The Rolling Stones, from Eric Clapton, Led Zeppelin, as well as pretty much the entire history of jazz.
But Otha Turner and most of the hill country musicians stayed put. Life remained largely as it had done, a life on the farm, playing at festivities and farmers' gatherings and funerals. As musicians, they made do with what they had, fashioning new instruments out of reeds by heating a rod and burning holes to hollow out the reed and create the finger holes. As a result of this isolation, fife and drum blues music maintained a sense of authenticity which, to ears used to the more polished sounds from the recording studio, can sound almost shocking. But later in his life, Otha did start to make appearances outside of his home state. In the 1980s, together with his bandmates Jesse May Hemphill and Abe Young, Otha appeared on the popular children's TV show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and described how he first came to play the fife.
You ream this cane out, Chin, see ya?
Yeah.
And you place your fingers just like this. Get your piece of chalk or pencil and mark that and moan down.
Well, how did you learn to do this?
Just see the old man doing that, and I stood and watched him and learned how to, I wanted to blow it, but he wouldn't let me blow. He said, I'll make you one, son. Let me show you something.
In the 90s, Otha and his band released a couple of critically lauded albums, Everybody Hollerin' Goat and From Senegal to Senatobia. As to its influence, fife and drum music is often credited with influencing the more rhythmic guitar style of hill country artists like R.L. Burnside and the amazing Junior Kimbrough. Kimbrough himself personally trained, or at least influenced, most of the blues musicians in the Marshall County area, including the late rockabilly legend Charlie Feathers, whom he taught to play guitar. So the influence of fife and drum blues music did spread to the wider community to some extent. But with Otha's death, many wonder if it will continue as a living tradition. Most keep that hope alive in the form of Otha's granddaughter Shaade Turner, who made her debut on fife with her grandfather at the age of 5, and continues to play on the hill country scene to this day.